Make it plain.
Make it plain.
M.I.P.
With Masamela Matfumo.
Mark Thompson.
Make it plain.
Get woke.
God bless you. Get woke. Folks, MIP is now COVID-free, meaning free to all subscribers as we navigate this pandemic. We're thinking about everyone, and we've got to get through this together. So for a limited time, no fee to subscribe to Make It Plain on your favorite podcast app. Ladies and gentlemen, my guest, who we've not had a chance to talk to since the pandemic broke out, is the editor of Democracy, a journal of ideas, author of the book, If We Can Keep It, How the Republic Collapsed and How It Might Be Saved. And of course, he is special correspondent to thedailybeast.com. Michael Tomasky joins us now to talk about pandemic, plus death cult, plus Obamagate equals we're effed, y'all. Michael, welcome back, buddy. How are you and yours, and how are you all faring in this pandemic?
Well, we're hanging in there, thank you. Up here in the suburbs of Washington, and at least I have a neighborhood to walk the dog in and so forth. But none of us is sick, thank goodness. So things could be worse. How about you?
Pretty good, just managing in this epicenter and blessed in the 2,500 cases a day, and we haven't been any of them yet. So
yeah,
thankful for that. But this stuff is scary. And I mean, from everything we've been able to see, ending the lockdown, as Trump and his Republican governors and armed militia want to do, is probably going to result in more cases.
Yeah, it just seems like madness to me, and we'll see how it unfolds. I hope we're wrong, but of course, people want to get back to work. They want to get their paychecks back. They want to be able to feed their kids and pay their mortgages. Of course, one understands why people are completely freaked out about all that stuff. But at the same time, the science seems pretty clear from what all the scientific people I see on TV and read in the media say, which is that, until you've got this, 14 days of limiting the number of new cases and flattening that curve, it's just not safe to do these things. So, we're seeing some contradictory evidence. They say so far in Florida it's all right, but Texas seems to be having these spurts, and Georgia a little bit, and I don't know, but yeah, obviously that's the big concern, that if we do what Trump wants, and now he's enlisting pro-Trump doctors to go out and say people should go back to work. These obviously aren't frontline doctors, I bet. They're just, pro-Trump doctors, like that guy who said he was the most healthy person ever to run for president. They could just prolong this and that's of course after his epic, complete worst in the advanced world failure at handling this.
Yeah. You've called their approach a death cult.
Well, there's just something very weird about it. This whole thing about defying science, not wearing masks. It's become not wearing the mask has become a symbol of not only being with Trump, but of being expressing a certain worldview that's bigger than Trump, and yeah, it's as if if you go into some of these really extreme right-wing sites, you see stuff like let's go infect the libtards, and of course you see things about how it's disproportionately affecting people of color, which to a normal human being is a tragedy, but to them is a selling point, and on and on and on. And yeah, it's just like they not only want you and me to die, or some of us, or they don't care about it, but they don't mind getting sick, if it helps the cause or something. So I'm not saying that of everybody, but it's just it's a kind of general psychology that's very weird. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And the whole thing about grandmothers,
Yeah.
I mean, they should be sacrificed if necessary.
Yeah.
That's the sickest thing I've ever heard of.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there's no grandmothers, the old, the infirm, the weak, the poor.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
I mean, there are undoubtedly some Americans who see this as an opportunity for a great, purgation of, what Dickens called the surplus population.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. You have also listed some of these 1,000 cuts by which death occurs. Um, Jared Kushner, first of all, he's saying we might not, we may not have an election.
Yeah. Yeah. Now here we're moving on from death of any given individual to death of the republic known as the United States of America.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, you can just see it happening. You can see it happening day by day, week by week, sometimes hour by hour. The things these people do that just pile up and pile up and pile up, and it's too much for any person to process. The stuff that Mike Pompeo is up to right now, like these dinners that were written about on, I guess it was Wednesday morning, that NBC broke the story about these sleazy dinners he was having in the State Department. I mean, that alone would be a massive, massive, massive story in any normal news context. But now it's just going to fade into the woodwork because there's so much. But yeah, to get back to Jared, just casually saying some days ago, whenever it was, yeah, the plan is to have an election, but I don't really know. It's not really my call. But there's no plan not to have an election. I mean, are you crazy? What kind of person are you? But they're just teeing it up to do whatever it is they feel they need to do.
Do you think that could really happen, that they could postpone or not have the election, Michael? I mean, and I'm not just saying that. I mean, we know the Supreme Court. We know that there are those who would go with him. That sounds like that's something they might really try to do.
Oh yeah. I put nothing past them. I put absolutely nothing past them. I also wrote in this column, there were some advisors to Abraham Lincoln who wanted him to postpone the election in 1864, but Lincoln's view was, well, this war is about democracy, and if we postpone democracy because of this war, doesn't that sort of ruin the point?
No.
Now that's an admirable posture that you'd like to see a president of the United States have, but of course this president is like, he'll cheat at anything he can cheat at. So yes, you're right to mention the Supreme Court. I suppose if they try it, it'll come down to the Supreme Court, and it'll probably come down to John Roberts, and whether he thinks it's more important to uphold the Constitution and a law that Congress passed in 1845, setting the date of the election. So a law that's 180 years old, roughly 175. Whether he thinks that's more important, or whether he thinks it's more important on balance, well, this is all kind of smelly, but if Trump gets another term, we got a couple other conservative judges on this court, and conservatism rules the day for another 4 years. I don't know. I don't know what these people think anymore.
Yeah. Well, but that also, of course, we're talking about democracy or the lack thereof. You wrote a piece in the New York Times about a year ago on competitive authoritarianism. Tell us about that, if you would.
Yeah, well, this is really interesting. So it turned out that there were a couple of political scientists. I tripped across this book last summer. There were a couple of political scientists who were studying countries. This was in the late 90s and the early to mid 2000s. They were studying countries, and they work in the field of what they call in political science democracy studies. and they were studying countries that were transitioning to democracy but hadn't quite made the full transition yet. In other words, dictator died and they had an election, or in the case of the Eastern Bloc countries, the Soviet Union collapsed and the Eastern Bloc collapsed, and they were trying to move to democracy. So they studied these countries and said, they came up with these criteria for determining whether they had made the transition to democracy. And, some of them had become democracies and some of them were still authoritarian. And then a lot of them were in this middle ground in between that didn't have a name, right? So they gave it a name, and the name is competitive authoritarianism. And they define competitive authoritarianism as a country that has the trappings of democracy. For example, officially a two-party or a multi-party system, officially a free press, officially an independent judiciary, but in practice doesn't really have all those things. So they hold elections, and the elections look like elections, but they're almost always won by the one side. And so they, at the time they were writing about, Belarus, Mozambique, places like that. But everything they said now applies to the United States of America and the Republican Party. They're a competitive authoritarian party. They want it to look like democracy, but not really be democracy.
And the illusion is actually that which is competitive. So it looks like you're having elections and competing for power, but you're really a de facto authoritarian regime.
Yeah, well, I mean, if you're having an election, but you're making sure that 300,000 people, or is it 400, in Wisconsin can't vote because of the color of their skin, what kind of free election is that?
Right.
And by the way, I don't know if people noticed, but like that judge, that right-wing judge in Wisconsin who lost to the liberal woman in the recent election, when they held the primary, that they made people stand in line and get sick.
Yes.
That judge has now unrecused himself from this voting law case. So he's now going to rule on it, and they're going to rule 4-3 to kick these people off the voter rolls.
Yeah, that's definitely authoritarianism.
That's competitive authoritarianism right there.
Yeah. You did mention the State Department too. Another inspector general fired. I mean, if that's not authoritarianism, I don't know what is. It's just we're going to do whatever we want to do.
Oh yeah.
There'll be no accountability, no repercussions. It's just whatever.
Yeah. And of course, there's nothing that anybody can do about it, because as long as Mitch McConnell won't do anything about it, and the Republicans, then there's not that much the Democrats can do. I mean, I do think the Democrats in the House could have been and could still be much more aggressive in oversight, much more aggressive. Republicans sure would have been. I mean, all the hearings they held on the non-Benghazi issue, they'll. So Democrats in the House could be more aggressive on oversight. I think there's no question about that. But it's really up to Republicans as long as McConnell controls the Senate, and of course he's not going to do anything. He's isolating this country. Yeah,
I'd like to think that Democrats being more aggressive was probably, I like to think it was somehow probably related to them trying to find an answer to how to hold hearings virtually. And obviously in the past couple of weeks, I think they figured that out. They need a secure means by which to do that. Now it looks like they've even voted, for ways to vote for distance voting themselves. So now that there's no excuse now to hold hearings, I like to think they would be more aggressive.
I'd like to think, but I mean, this predates the pandemic too. I mean, they took control in January of 19, and they try. I mean, I guess it's a complicated story. I mean, if some Democratic oversight chairman or chairwoman were here now, they'd say, well, guys, we subpoenaed people, and they just ignored our subpoenas. And there's some truth to that too. And that's another one that is going to be up to John Roberts.
Yeah.
Can they just ignore these subpoenas? I mean, it's an outrage. It's an open and shut. To me, and like to any constitutional person, Congress has had oversight power since the very first Congress. The very first Congress.
And so
I don't understand how and even if the good guys prevail and Roberts votes with the liberals and it's 5-4, the administration must cooperate with Congress. That still leaves us with two very grim facts. Number one, 4 justices on the United States Supreme Court voted to support this lawlessness. And number 2, Trump's still going to say, I'm not doing it. I don't care. What are you going to arrest me, John Roberts? Come arrest me. Where's your police force?
Yeah.
Right.
That's
exactly what he'll do.
Right. Of course, another of the 1,000 cuts is Obamagate. I mean, that's helping to mobilize his base, but I don't know if the American people in general are falling for it. Now, some of our friends in media are. They've been legitimizing it with coverage. But I'll be honest with you, Michael. How smart can it be to run against a popular president? Obama's gone, so you resurrect him for the purpose of running against him. And not to mention, you want him to come and testify for 17 hours like Hillary did on Benghazi. Is that what you really want to do? Is that smart?
Exactly.
Do you really want to give him a forum? I don't know if that's the brightest or the deepest cut of all.
Yeah. Oh yeah. I mean, but it's again, it's just an unspeakably outrageous thing that in any other administration and in a normal time where Congress took its constitutional duties more seriously and wasn't just a partisan, would have Washington just absolutely up in arms. It's all manufactured, and everybody knows it's all manufactured. But they've invented this narrative about the deep state, and you watch. I mean, this Durham guy, Bill Barr. Bill Barr thinks that liberals are godless threats to the natural order, and so anything's justified. When you think that, anything is justified. So this guy Durham, I guess, is going to return indictments against I don't know who. I don't want to name. I don't want to asperse anybody, but we know who their targets are.
Mm-hmm.
And they're going to try and have phony trials about these guys during an election year. And, they're going to try to taint Biden. I mean, just everything, like this Susan Rice email that was revealed Tuesday night from Inauguration Day, completely innocuous email. It just says, buy the book, go buy the book. We want to make sure we go by the book.
Mm-hmm.
And somehow they're turning that into some kind of creepy, scary, nefarious thing. It's just every word that comes out of their mouths these days is a lie, including and thee, as Mary McCarthy once said of Lillian Hellman.
Yeah. I was saying to someone else this week, the 19th was would have been Malcolm X's 95th birthday.
Wow.
You probably heard of the conspiracy theory at one time, because they went from birtherism. It was birtherism. Then it was, Obama's an illegitimate son of Malcolm X, right?
Right.
Now, how do you go from that to then being this behind the scenes Wizard of Oz, deep state government orchestrator? That means it's too extreme. So the son of Malcolm X is now running the government from a secret place. I mean, it's just whatever they can throw up against the wall.
Yeah.
And so now you mentioned what Congress ought to be doing more of. What about the Biden campaign? How are you feeling about his campaign? And I mean, obviously it's not getting as much coverage as it deserves. But how do you think that's shaping up?
I feel okay about his campaign right now. I mean, he has responded. There's only so much he can do. He's got to stay home. God forbid he can't get sick.
Amen.
So he's got to stay home.
Yeah.
There's only so much he can do. There's only so much attention he's going to get. I'm very encouraged by the moves he's made since this pandemic. And I mean, he's talking, if you want to say more left, fine, or more populist or more aggressive, more toward, a really much more aggressive and active role for government in responding to this crisis. He's definitely moved there. I mean, putting AOC on that task force, so I think Biden has made terrific moves in these last few weeks. And I think the Tara Reade thing is kind of over. I mean, I don't pass judgment on whether she's telling the truth or not, but there are enough holes there for people to wonder, A, and B, Biden handled it well.
Mm-hmm.
And, I mean, it's not to say that Trump's not going to try to bring it up or whatever, but, I don't think it's a voting issue for, I mean, it's just a vanishingly small number of people at this point.
Yeah. Quickly, Michael, can I share something with you just on that, if you don't mind?
Yeah, please.
What I've been saying to people is this, because I think we've all, those of us who have been empathetic to the Me Too movement, and we support it. I support it, you support it. But I think the way we have to look at this now, and I think the Biden case, if no other, puts us in this position, is really what is equivalent to what is a sentencing disparity. So that Trump can have dozens of accusers and it's ignored and the media is no big deal. But when a Democrat does it, because we are, as Democrats, tend to be on the moral high ground and have more moral authority, like in the case of Al Franken and others, it can be tolerated. Biden should withdraw, all of that. And what I'm saying is, if we follow those rules from here on out, there won't be any Democrats, just based upon an accusation, because up to this point, the rule of thumb has been a mere accusation would disqualify you. And so to me, that's a sentencing disparity that sometimes we ourselves have unfairly opposed on our side. And so I think we have to look at it. I think there has to be a way to take accusers seriously and examine their stories without there being a sentence prematurely rendered such as to harm us politically and the country, y'all, the country democratically. Michael is telling us about competitive authoritarianism. He's not making it up. That is what we are seeing. So you play right into that. All they can do is say, well, look, let's put a Me Too case on everybody we can. Yeah. And then we're gone. And then they've got it. So, that's just my thought about it. And again, that has nothing to do with the merits of the case. It's again, sentencing space, like crack and powder cocaine. Well, okay, you snort cocaine powder, you walk around free forever. I smoke crack, I got to go to prison. No, that's not the way.
Right. Yeah, I think a good thing seems to have come out of this Tara Reade episode, which is that we've recalibrated the standard. So it's not automatically believe all women, which, by the way, a lot of feminists never said. I mean, there was a fantastic op-ed by a woman named Susan Faludi, who's just a great writer, on Monday or Tuesday of this week in the New York Times that I would recommend people read. It's a canard. It's a right-wing canard that became the standard. But anyway, we sort of have gone from this idea that women have to be believed to the idea that women have to be heard and given a fair hearing without being smeared and stuff. Now, that's a good standard, I think, that everybody can live with. And that's how Biden handled this. He said, I have nothing bad to say about her. I just say that this did not happen. Yeah. And I think that gives accused men a chance to state their case and stand their ground, while also still respecting women's, ability to come forward with such charges.
Yeah. And I give him high marks, too, for respecting women when he said, I think it was very commendable for him to say, if you believe Tara Reade, you probably shouldn't vote for me. That to me was a principled position to take. And I'm sure that opened a lot of people's eyes. But lastly, Michael, your thoughts on the vice presidential pick. Who are you favoring? Who do you think would be the best?
Oh, Kamala Harris was my front runner and probably still is my front runner. But my thinking on this has gotten foggier in recent days. I mean, I was against Warren just because, they have a Republican governor and he could appoint her successor. And to me, that's just, you can't put a Republican in the Senate, at a time like this. Just can't responsibly do that. Now, I've heard some people say, and I'm going to check this myself later this week or next, that the Massachusetts legislature can change the law.
Yes, that's
and
true.
Take that power away from the governor.
Now, I can confirm that is true. They can do that.
Okay. Well, that makes Warren more of a possibility. And I don't know, between Warren and Harris, they both have good points and they both have slight shortcomings. But I still would, on balance, go for Harris. And then somebody made a surprisingly strong case to me on the phone the other day for Susan Rice. Which she's really smart. She'd come in ready.
Yeah. Well, it's an embarrassment of riches. There are a lot of good choices.
There are, and nobody's perfect, and everybody should just get out of their head that there's some perfect person. Nobody's perfect, but a lot of them are really good.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah.
Glad we're at a moment where we're at least we're considering certainly with certainty a woman. That would definitely be a certainty. Yeah. Michael Tomasky, folks at the Daily Beast, folks, we have learned something today, and I want you to think about it and consider it competitive authoritarianism, and so that's an illusion of democracy. We're going to drill down a little bit more on that as time goes by. Very, very keen observation, Michael Tomasky. Buddy, you and your family continue to stay well, okay?
You too, my friend. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Michael.
Yep.
Bye-bye.
Cheers.
God, you are our refuge. Send our ancestors to guard our doors. Cast out this virus from our communities and our bodies. Heal, bless, and protect everyone listening and their loved ones. Thank you for listening to Make It Plain and Get Woke. Remember to listen, like, and subscribe on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and wherever you get your podcasts. If all minds are clear, it has been made plain.